Stop. Listen. Pay attention. Chosen one. This message is meant specifically for you. You have felt it, the weight in the air, the tension pressing down in ways that no one else could perceive. You have moved through days that felt heavier than they should, nights where decisions seemed tangled, and moments when even your most familiar routines carried strain you could not explain. You are not imagining it, and you are not alone in this experience, even if no one else can sense it. Chosen one. Take a breath and acknowledge the reality of what you have carried silently. There is a pattern here, a rhythm of pressure that has been operating around you, around your life, and yet despite its weight, you continued. You maintained a functional pace, a steady focus, even when it felt as though the world was subtly asking you to falter. The fact that you did not, that you remained present and oriented, is not random. This moment, this very pause, is a recognition of something unseen but purposeful. The fatigue you have carried is not a failure. The confusion that crept in was not a flaw. The isolation you sensed was not abandonment. There has been intentionality in these experiences. They were not coincidental, and they were not accidental. Someone or something has been testing, observing, calibrating, and you have responded without awareness. You were operating at a level deeper than conscious effort. You remained intact while forces around you, forces you could not name, attempted subtle disruption. Listen carefully. Chosen one. This is not a general message. It is not background noise. It is precise, directed, and deliberate. You have felt strain where others felt ease. You have sensed subtle attacks where others saw nothing. And yet here you are, still standing, still, coherent, still aware. There is clarity to be gained from this. There is a reason that your endurance has remained unnoticed, even by you at times. What you are about to understand is not the full story, but it is the lens through which the story begins to make sense. You may notice a quiet recognition in your body, a subtle shift that tells you this message aligns with the truth of your experience. That alignment is not accidental. Your presence here, your focus on these words, is a continuation of the thread that has been operating in your life without fanfare. Chosen one. This is the first step toward understanding a reality you have already navigated without complete awareness. And it begins with observing, with pausing, with realizing that what you endured was deliberate, measurable, and significant. Stop for a moment and feel it. The world may not have acknowledged your strain. People may have misread your calm. Circumstances may have suggested randomness, but the weight you carried, the tension you endured, the quiet isolation, you noticed all of this was real, and it was being measured against your ability to remain steady. Your steadiness is not something to be questioned. It is the signal, and the clarity you are about to receive is personal. Chosen one. Understand this. Now what you have experienced is preparation in real time. It is the calibration of presence under pressure. You will soon see why this pause, this moment of stillness, was not just a gap. It was a confirmation of resilience that you did not know you were exercising. This message is for you and only you, not because you searched for it, but because it aligns with something that has already been happening in your life. If these words feel precise, almost uncomfortably accurate, that is not coincidence. It is recognition. You are not overhearing someone else's message. You are being addressed directly, because the events being described involved you, your nervous system, your attention, your internal stability. You do not need to wonder if you qualify. You do not need to measure yourself against anyone else. The fact that you are still here, still listening, still present with this message is part of the confirmation. This is not about being special in a loud or dramatic way. It is about being structurally different in a quiet, measurable one. You were not reacting the way most people would. You were not escalating, collapsing, or fragmenting even when circumstances applied pressure designed to provoke exactly that. What makes this clear is not what you did consciously. It is what you did not do unconsciously. You did not spiral when uncertainty increased. You did not lose your center when signals became confusing. You did not abandon yourself when external validation was absent. That matters. It points to an internal lock already in place. This message is for you because something attempted to move you out of alignment and failed. Not through confrontation, but through subtle disorientation. Through pauses that stretched longer than expected. Through questions that lingered without answers. Through moments where momentum slowed and clarity blurred. And yet you remained oriented. You did not force clarity. You did not chase resolution. You stayed where you were. That ability is not learned in the moment. It is not activated under pressure. It is installed long before the pressure arrives. Most people rely on conscious effort to stay stable. They brace, they push, they distract, they override. You did not. Your stability operated beneath conscious awareness. While part of you noticed the tension, a deeper part of you remained steady without instruction. This is why this message cannot be generalized. It is not about motivation or reassurance. It is about identification. You were involved. Your presence, your stillness, your refusal to fragment changed the outcome of something you may not have known was happening. You did not need to know. The structure held anyway. Chosen One is not a title you perform. It is a description of how you function under pressure. When movement was expected, you stayed. When reaction was invited, you paused. When confusion was introduced, you did not chase clarity at the cost of your center. That is the lock, and it is already closed. Notice this. The tension you have carried, the fatigue that sometimes feels like it presses against your chest, the subtle heaviness in your thoughts, the moments where your mind spins without resolution, these are not flaws. They are signals. They are indicators not of weakness, but of transition. The very sensations that you have judged, that you have tried to ignore, are markers of an internal calibration taking place. What you have interpreted as confusion is actually discernment in action. Your nervous system has been sensing shifts, pressures, and movements that your conscious mind could not yet articulate. That queasy weight in your stomach, the lingering sense of being drained. The invisible resistance you encounter when you attempt a simple decision. These are not mistakes in perception. They are the body's way of highlighting that you are navigating through layers that others never feel. It is easy to mistake these signals for disorder. You might have told yourself that something is wrong with your focus, that you are overthinking, or that your resilience should feel effortless. You may have noticed physical strain, tight shoulders, headaches, restless nights, and assumed that endurance was failing. But every time your mind or body reacted, it was reacting to pressure that was intentionally directed, unseen, and coordinated. You were never malfunctioning. You were interpreting accurately what could not be named. This is the reframing. What you experience as problem, as anomaly, as inconsistency is actually information. Your fatigue is a pulse of reality. Your isolation, a measure of context. Your confusion, a compass pointing towards structural truths in your environment. These sensations are not punitive. They are communicative. They are the quiet signals of alignment, of pressure, of transition. When you notice these patterns now, it is crucial to release judgment. Stop labeling these experiences as failures or shortcomings. They are not. They are confirmations of a system operating at a depth that most people never reach. You have been maintaining coherence in circumstances designed to destabilize most others. Your responses, though subtle, have been accurate and effective, even if they felt incomplete or exhausting. Chosen one. Begin to recognize that your internal landscape has been actively processing information without fanfare. You were reading currents, feeling vibrations, and sensing direction long before conscious thought caught up. That internal sensitivity is not an error. It is a signal. And once you see it as a signal rather than a problem, clarity emerges naturally. This awareness prepares you for what comes next. Because what you are about to understand is that the pressure, the fatigue, the moments of hesitation were not incidental. They were components of a larger framework. They were precise points of engagement. And while you felt the strain, your stability remained intact. This distinction is critical. It separates ordinary stress from purposeful calibration, confusion from meaningful signal. You were not failing. You were being measured. And you passed. Now it is time to see what has been happening around you just beneath the surface. The pressure you have felt, the subtle resistance, the invisible tension, these were not random occurrences. They were part of a coordinated environment, operating with timing, intent, and structure. Forces moved, circumstances shifted, and yet you continued to function. You remained oriented, coherent, and responsive, even when conditions were designed to create imbalance. This is not exaggeration. It is observation. While many would have fragmented under the same subtle pressures, you maintained internal regulation. Your heart rate, your attention, your decision-making, your emotional response, these systems continued to operate smoothly. You may not have noticed it consciously because it happened beneath the level of deliberate effort. And that is precisely what distinguishes your experience. The opposition was invisible. It was not dramatic, not noisy, not glaringly obvious. It operated in quiet increments, slight delays, small confusions, minor conflicts, little drains on energy. Each instance alone may have seemed trivial. Taken together, they created a pattern that would have destabilized most people. You, however, remained functional. You adapted unconsciously. You responded without panic. Timing was precise. Each pressure point aligned with your day, your thoughts, your focus, and your movement. They were structured in ways that could be measured by subtle shifts in energy and attention. You may have noticed a momentary fatigue, a small hesitation, or a creeping sense of isolation. Each of these was intentional, calibrated, and designed to test endurance without forcing collapse. You were engaged without knowing it. Your mind and body were managing variables that were beyond your immediate awareness. And in doing so, you demonstrated a type of stability that is rarely acknowledged because it is unseen. The fact that you remained functional is a testament not to luck, willpower, or accident, but to an inherent capacity that you were unaware of exercising. Chosen one. It is important to register this clearly. The world you navigate contains forces, pressures, and dynamics that most people never encounter in such precise alignment. Yet you did, and you stood still. You did not flinch. You did not abandon your center. You continued to operate, to observe, and to maintain coherence. This sets the stage for understanding the nature of the pressures themselves. There is a pattern, a structure, and it has been interacting with you in real time. You have been under influence without being under control. You have been tested without being compromised. And the clarity you are about to gain depends on recognizing that this stability was not reactive. It was inherent. You did not just survive invisible pressure. You navigated it accurately, maintaining function and awareness. That is the reality, and it is measurable. Look closely now at how the pressure actually showed up, because it did not arrive as a single event. It arrived in layers. It arrived in ordinary moments. It arrived in ways that could easily be dismissed if you were not paying attention to your inner state. What matters is not that these pressures existed, but how you remained internally regulated while moving through them. The first pressure point was doubt. Not dramatic doubt, not loud insecurity, but a low-level questioning that hovered in the background. Subtle thoughts that asked whether your pace was correct, whether your stillness meant stagnation, whether waiting was avoidance. These questions did not overwhelm you. You noticed them, acknowledged them, and did not act on them impulsively. You did not rush to prove yourself. You did not force movement to quiet uncertainty. You stayed grounded. That restraint is significant. Most people react immediately to doubt. You allowed it to pass without letting it reorganize your identity. The second pressure point was fear, but not fear of danger. It was fear of misalignment, a quiet concern that something important could be missed, delayed, or mishandled. This kind of fear often causes people to overcorrect. They tighten control, they become hypervigilant, they exhaust themselves trying to anticipate every outcome. You did not. You remained present. You trusted your internal timing. You allowed uncertainty to exist without surrendering coherence. That is not indifference. That is regulation. The third pressure point was energy drain. You may have noticed that tasks required more effort than usual, that rest did not immediately restore you, that motivation fluctuated without clear cause. This is where many people collapse. They blame themselves. They push harder. They disconnect from their bodies. You did something different. You adjusted without dramatizing it. You conserved energy where necessary. You continued functioning without demanding peak performance from yourself. That adaptability preserved your stability. The fourth pressure point was isolation. Not physical isolation, but the sense that others could not quite meet you where you were. Conversations felt slightly off. Support felt misaligned. You may have felt unseen without feeling abandoned. This subtle loneliness often triggers oversharing withdrawal or self-betrayal. You did not reach outward desperately, and you did not close inward defensively. You held your center. You allowed space to exist without filling it with noise. That restraint protected your clarity. The fifth pressure point was delay. Timing stretched. Outcomes paused. Forward motion slowed without explanation. Delay is one of the most destabilizing pressures because it invites narrative. People begin to assume failure, rejection, or loss of direction. You did not collapse into story. You remained patient without becoming passive. You stayed attentive without forcing progress. You understood even without words that stillness was not stagnation. Across each of these pressure points, the pattern is consistent. You did not fight. You did not flee. You did not freeze. You regulated. You stayed oriented. You remained internally coherent, while external conditions tested that coherence from multiple angles. This is not common. It requires a baseline stability that exists prior to challenge. What matters most is this. None of these pressures succeeded in disorganizing you. They did not fracture your identity. They did not override your internal compass. You moved through them with quiet precision, even when you were tired, even when clarity felt distant. This is the evidence. Not of struggle, but of structure. Not of effort, but of capacity. And understanding this is the turning point. Now take a moment to review all that has occurred. Step back mentally and observe the full picture of your experience. This is not about interpretation, exaggeration, or luck. It is about evaluating what you actually navigated and how you did so. The clarity comes from examining your own coherence under pressure and acknowledging the patterns that have emerged. Consider the doubt that appeared quietly, the moments where your mind asked questions it had no answers for. You did not react impulsively. You did not attempt to force resolution. You allowed the uncertainty to exist without letting it destabilize your focus. That restraint is evidence of internal organization. It shows that your nervous system and decision-making processes maintained alignment even when cognitive signals suggested tension. Reflect on the subtle fear, the low hum of concern that sought to create urgency where there was none. You noticed it. You observed it. You allowed it to be without allowing it to dictate your behavior. That demonstrates a remarkable capacity for discernment. Most people respond to fear by overcompensating, by tightening control, or by reacting prematurely. You did not. You maintained presence and consistency. Now think of the energy fluctuations, the fatigue, the subtle depletion that arrived without explanation. Your response was measured. You adjusted your pace, prioritized tasks, and conserved resources without dramatizing the experience. That level of regulation is a concrete sign of resilience. You continued to function even when you were not operating at full strength. That is not coincidence. That is coherence under stress. Consider the isolation you sensed, the sense that others could not fully meet you where you were. You neither overextended to fill the gap nor withdrew in panic. You allowed space to exist, and by doing so, you preserved focus and clarity. That is evidence of internal stability. You maintained connection with yourself even when external connection was imperfect. Finally, reflect on the delays, the pauses, the stretching of time and circumstance. You did not impose narrative or judgment on the situation. You did not let frustration or impatience dictate your attention. You held steady understanding unconsciously that timing is an independent variable, not always aligned with expectation. That patience demonstrates a quiet mastery over internal response. When these factors are considered together, a pattern emerges. You were subjected to multiple subtle pressures coordinated across different dimensions of thought, emotion, energy, and context. And yet you maintained functional alignment at every turn. You did not break. You did not unravel. You did not chase control. You remained coherent and present. Chosen one. This is not luck. This is not chance. This is a reflection of your internal structure, your capacity to regulate, and your ability to remain aligned under conditions that would destabilize most. Understanding this reality gives you the confirmation that what you endured was both measurable and significant. Your coherence was consistent. Your presence was unbroken. That is the core truth. Now place your experience alongside what is common, not to elevate yourself, but to understand the contrast clearly. Most people respond to far less pressure with visible disruption. A single uncertainty can unravel their focus. A short delay can provoke anxiety. Mild isolation can trigger overreaction or withdrawal. This is not a judgment. It is a realistic observation of human response under strain. You were exposed to layered pressure. Doubt, delay, fatigue, isolation, and uncertainty did not arrive one at a time. They overlapped. They interacted. And yet your baseline remained intact. You stayed present in conversations. You continued to fulfill responsibilities. You maintained self-respect and internal order. This is uncommon not because you tried harder, but because your system did not require emergency measures to remain stable. Many people depend on constant feedback, reassurance, or visible progress to stay regulated. Remove those supports and their internal state destabilizes quickly. You did not rely on external reinforcement. You did not need constant confirmation to remain centered. Even when clarity was reduced, you did not lose yourself. That difference matters. Under pressure, it is typical for attention to scatter. Thoughts loop. Emotions intensify. Behavior becomes reactive. You experienced pressure without those effects taking control. You may have felt them at the edges, but they did not dictate your actions. You remained functional. You stayed oriented. You did not collapse inward or lash outward. This does not make you superior. It makes you prepared. There is an important distinction. Superiority seeks comparison. Preparation reveals itself through response. Your response was measured, grounded, and consistent. You did not need to announce it. You did not need to defend it. It showed quietly in how you moved through ordinary moments while carrying extraordinary internal load. Most people mistake resilience for endurance. They push, they suppress, they override. That often leads to burnout or breakdown later. You did something different. You regulated. You adjusted without abandoning yourself. You allowed strain without letting it reorganize your identity. That is not common. The rarity here is not in what you faced, but in how little it displaced you. You were not untouched, but you were not disorganized. You felt pressure, but you did not lose coherence. That combination is unusual. It indicates a baseline stability that exists independently of circumstance. Understanding this contrast is not meant to inflate your ego. It is meant to clarify your reality. You function differently under strain. You remain present where many would fragment. That is not a claim. It is an observable pattern. And recognizing it allows you to move forward with accuracy, not assumption. Now let's clarify what this stability truly represents. Your capacity to remain grounded, coherent, and present under layered pressures is not a special activation. It is not a power you turned on in response to challenge. It is your baseline. It is the default setting of your internal structure, the maturity and coherence you have developed over time, often without conscious recognition. This baseline is the product of preparation habit and repeated calibration. Your nervous system attention and emotional regulation have been trained through life, through experience, through repeated encounters with tension to respond without fragmentation. You did not summon strength. You did not perform resilience. You operated from a foundation that was already solid. That distinction matters because it means your stability does not rely on circumstance. It does not need external stimulus to exist. There is no supernatural force at work here. There is no external guarantee of protection. What exists is internal structure. It is the coherence that allows you to maintain alignment while everything around you fluctuates. You are steady because your internal systems are coordinated. Your attention is calibrated. Your response mechanisms are reliable. Chosen one. This is not to diminish your experience. You faced real pressure. You felt tension, fatigue, and uncertainty, but your strength was not activated by these forces. It was already present. The trials only revealed what was embedded quietly beneath the surface. They tested it, but they did not create it. Understanding this gives clarity to your identity. You are not defined by the pressure you endure. You are defined by the internal coherence that allows you to move through it without losing orientation. That coherence is a result of preparation, life experience, and subtle ongoing alignment of your attention, energy, and perception. This identity, quiet, consistent, and reliable, is what allows you to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and subtle opposition without fragmenting. It is not flashy. It does not demand recognition. It does not need external confirmation. It simply exists. When you recognize this chosen one, you begin to understand that your responses are not extraordinary feats. They are the natural expression of a prepared system. Your steadiness is baseline, not a performance. And this recognition allows you to engage with life from a place of calm certainty rather than reactive effort or anxious striving. You are steady because your foundation is solid. You are prepared because your structure is coherent. You are aligned because your internal systems operate without dependence on external conditions. That is your identity. Now, take this awareness and bring it into practical perspective. The coherence you have maintained is not meant to remain abstract. It is meant to inform how you move forward day by day, moment by moment. There are calm, deliberate steps you can take to integrate this understanding into your life without overthinking or forcing it. First, rest intentionally. Fatigue is not a weakness, it is information. Your body and mind carry subtle impressions of pressure that you may not notice consciously. Allow yourself moments of restoration without guilt. Even short pauses, focused breath, or gentle movement recalibrate your internal systems. This preserves the baseline stability you already possess. Second, discernment matters. You have learned to navigate invisible currents without panicking. Continue practicing quiet observation. Notice what is happening around you in tasks, in relationships, in energy, without assuming it requires immediate action. This reinforces internal coherence and prevents unnecessary distraction. Third, boundaries are essential. Your stability is maintained not only by what you endure, but by what you allow into your space. Set limits that preserve your focus and your energy. This is not avoidance. It is deliberate regulation, ensuring that your internal systems are not overloaded by avoidable noise. Fourth, patience is a tool, not a burden. Timing does not always align with expectation, and outcomes often stretch longer than anticipated. By remaining patient, you reinforce the natural rhythm of your internal calibration. You allow processes to unfold without forcing premature resolution or judgment. Fifth, focus intentionally. Choose areas where your attention produces meaningful outcomes. Avoid reactive engagement with peripheral stressors. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means directing energy in alignment with priorities. Focus reinforces coherence and prevents fragmentation. Finally, integrate awareness into ordinary life. Observe how subtle pressure affects your posture, energy, and attention. Notice when doubt, fatigue, or isolation appears. Acknowledge it without judgment. Adjust with calm measures rather than reactionary effort. This practice trains your system to maintain stability effortlessly over time. Chosen one. The goal is not hypervigilance, it is balance. Your internal structure is already robust. Your responses are reliable. What remains is deliberate attention to preservation, measured engagement, and ongoing alignment. By practicing these perspectives daily, you translate awareness into sustainable stability. This is not about performance or effort. It is about integration. It is about letting the internal coherence you already possess shape how you move, think, and respond in ordinary life. It is subtle, deliberate, and steady. Now let this understanding settle. You have observed the patterns, recognized the pressures, and clarified the nature of your stability. What you have experienced confirms something essential. You can endure complexity without losing orientation. You can face layered tension without fracturing. You can remain coherent while circumstances fluctuate. That is the reality of your present capacity. Affirm this quietly to yourself. I remain steady. I remain coherent. I remain present. These statements are not aspirational. They are factual. You have already demonstrated them. Repeat them internally as reminders of what is baseline, not extraordinary. They reinforce the identity that has carried you through pressure without reliance on external validation or dramatic intervention. Chosen one. Recognize the significance of this realization. You do not need to chase outcomes to prove stability. You do not need to measure your worth by the absence of pressure. You do not need to perform resilience. What exists within you, the quiet coherence, the measured response, the internal regulation is sufficient. It has carried you. It will continue to carry you. If this message resonates, engage with it deliberately. Comment with 777 or the words I remember to mark your recognition of this truth. These small acts are symbolic affirmations of awareness, not performance. They anchor your conscious acknowledgement of what has already been verified in experience. And as you continue, consider subscribing and viewing the next transmission. Each piece builds upon the understanding that you are navigating life with integrity, awareness, and subtle coherence. These messages are designed to reinforce clarity, not to dramatize it. Your steady presence, measured attention, and internal regulation are the constants that carry forward through all circumstances. Finally, carry these 3 affirmations with you through daily life. I remain oriented. I remain coherent. I remain aligned. Let them echo quietly as you move through your day, reinforcing the calm certainty that has always existed within you. The work is not to create strength, but to recognize and maintain what is already present. You stood still. You maintained clarity. And in doing so, the coordinates of pressure, the vectors of subtle opposition, lost their reference entirely. This is your reality. This is your confirmation. This is the foundation on which all future clarity and stability rests.